Hi.
You can just make me host if you want.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing now.
Okay, perfect. I just didn't know if you wanted me to start it or not.
That's okay. I got in the habit of it now.
Okay.
All right, you should be host now.
Perfect. How's the phone ringing so far? Is it going okay?
Yeah, it's been all lawyers.
Yeah.
So
Check
those are
ready.
easy. And one call about a piece of land, which I just gave them the agent's number.
Perfect. Okay.
Yeah, it's been busy, but lawyer calls are easy. So,
Yes.
but my printer died somehow. Everything prints like this.
Oh.
So I put a new toner in because I thought maybe there was no toner left and fresh toner and it still won't print.
Huh.
So I'll just make a folder of things to print and I'll go to the office. I have to bring files in for sales anyways, so I'll be in once or twice a week bringing them files. So I might as well just print stuff when I go there.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to hop off now.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Good morning.
Morning.
Morning. I'm driving today, so
Hey,
I'll be
Dennis. Good morning.
I'll be video off.
Yes, and driving carefully. It always makes me nervous when I'm on Zooms and people have their video on and we can see them. Yeah, see, like that, they're driving and trying to talk to us at the same time. I'm like, ah.
It's almost like we feel a little accountable or responsible for him driving, like, and when he shouldn't be. Yeah, good job, Dennis. Turn it off. Hey.
I'll be on mute for most of it.
Sounds good. It's a beautiful day. Hey, everybody.
It's gorgeous out. Love
Wow.
it. The sun makes all the difference, right?
It does. It does. I just wish I had my business cards or like a little bit more set up because I'm digging to knock on doors.
Ah, good.
Yeah, but I have to I just actually got my domain created this weekend and I have my email set up and my pictures were a little bit delayed, obviously due to COVID. And so, like now I can actually put in my profiles and start get the business cards. And then I just can't wait. It's almost bothering me, but it's good with COVID because I'm calling and getting comfortable, but really looking forward to getting the material I can get going.
The big thing there too, though, Jen, is I want to get out there and do the same thing, and I have my cards, but because of COVID, you're supposed to be staying in your area. Now we're essential, but I always think if I went knocking on door to door with people that I know, they might still get a little ticked off. So
absolutely,
I'm just holding out and waiting. I'm gonna do some Facebook ads this week. I got my website up and on the go, so we'll see how
good job. Congratulations. That's awesome, Dennis.
Yeah, that's
so
fantastic.
so we'll see how that works. See if I can get it figured out for the ads.
Yeah, the Facebook ads are really awesome. Through Command, Aaron's got some videos posted on our YouTube channel. If you haven't checked out some of the tech training sessions on that, there are some video recordings. It's very straightforward to use. Like once you do it once, it's quite easy, and they've got it. It's all set up. So KW had a partnership actually with Facebook. So our ads through Command, that was developed in partnership with Facebook. So it's really awesome because they've already got the algorithms all set up to target. So you go in and you select like attract listing, attract buyer, you know, promote, and it'll you pick which one you want, and then it'll target for that specific thing. So it's really cool. We've had some agents who've had a lot of success with the Facebook ads. And when you break it down, like the cost per lead is really, really low. And obviously it's a volume thing too, right? The more you do, the more like clicks you get, the more impressions you get, the more likelihood you have of turning something over into an actual lead. But anyway, yeah, it's awesome. So if you haven't checked out some of those tech training sessions, either live or the recorded ones, check it out.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I actually went on to YouTube and added one of the ones that Aaron did to my liked list, so I can go back and watch it whenever I want.
Smart. That's good.
That's great.
All right. So welcome everybody. We are doing Negotiate the Deal. Power session 10. Look at you guys go. So for those of you who don't know me, I think most everybody does, but I am Melissa. I am one of your managing associate brokers. I am part of the leadership team here at KW Select. I am also an active agent helping run a team. So I wear lots of hats and I can answer many different questions for you if you have them. So feel free to ask questions. Ignite is meant to be a collaborative experience. I know most of you guys were on my session on Wednesday, I think it was last week. The days kind of melt together now. But yeah, so feel free, please ask questions. Stop me. It's about learning from each other and going through the material together. And you'll know, like I from my style, I try to stick to the material, but I also try to give you some real world examples and backstory and all of that. So welcome and thank you for being here. And you're at Power Session 10. You guys are almost done. This is amazing. So I hope that you're enjoying Ignite. This is a great session. This is one of my favorites actually to teach. Negotiating is, one of the things that we are, our strong suit as far as an agent. Typically, often when you ask a client what they are looking for in an agent, often they want someone, the obvious, they want someone they know, like, trust, obviously, but they want someone who's going to negotiate the best terms for them and represent their interests to the back, right? So negotiating really plays a big role in that. So today we're going to learn negotiating tips. We're going to understand the most common points of negotiation, walk through the 3 Ps approach to the negotiation process, identify negotiation tactics and counter tactics, and let's get rolling. So as far as your mission and some of your homework, like I said before, where we're doing this on Zoom, like normally if we were in the classroom, we would break for the 20 minutes for you to make your calls and we would report out on that. In the essence of time and Zoom, I'm going to leave that to you to do on your own time. But just please know that is, I'm not skipping it because it's not important. I'm just skipping it because of the format we're in. So please make sure you do take the time to do that. Like, your lead generation is important. So you want to always be adding contacts, right? That's the whole idea. And so I'll let you, so the idea is to make your calls for 20 minutes to make contact with as many people as possible. You want to be asking for referrals and then ideally securing the appointment. So you want to always come at your calls from a positive perspective. So if that, making sure you're in the right frame of mind, you've got that positive mindset, and away you go. So that we'll leave that, but you're going to do that on your own time. So let's move right into the material. So negotiations are an integral part of most real estate transactions, as you guys know. Most buyers and sellers feel negotiation skills are one of the most important characteristics of an agent. Okay. So as with the offer process, negotiation is a pivotal point. It can literally be the deal breaker. And negotiations can happen in multiple steps in the contract. So obviously the one we think of primarily is during the offer, right? So it's the goal of getting an accepted offer in place. And then you have that conditional period. And so that's once you have the offer accepted and you want to get to the goal of actually closing. Okay. So at that point, there can be some more negotiation come up. Now, my same sort of 2 cents that I kind of gave you guys on the buyer one last week. In the market we're in now is very different than a balanced market or a buyer's market, right? We're in a seller's market. So right now, during that contract phase, and we'll talk about this a little further, but when you're in that accepted contract phase, waiting to close, in a balanced market or in a buyer's market, when the buyer has the upper hand, it's not unusual to have negotiations come up at that point. In this market, it is, because if you open up your deal on an inspection item, so if it's something that has to do with home inspection, financing, anything in your clause 4.1, 8.1, your lawyer review, if you're on well and septic, your clause 2 in your well and septic schedule, if you propose an amendment on any of those items, you are opening up the deal. Okay, so this is me wearing my broker hat now. When you open up the deal on an inspection item, condition precedent item, then you are at risk of getting your buyer kicked out of that deal. Okay, the way the clause reads, if notice of dissatisfaction is received, either party is at liberty to terminate the agreement. So notice of dissatisfaction in writing is your amendment on the inspection item, for example. So say, you might not even say, I want that, I don't know, let's say I want that, let me give you, what's a good example? I want that like leaky toilet fixed, and I want this fixed and that. Say there's a bunch of small things that adds up to, $1,000. Say the air exchanger is not working. Okay. So you're looking, a couple $1,000s for some repairs or replacement. If you propose an amendment asking them to fix, repair, give you money off the price for that inspection related item, then you are opening up your deal. Okay. So if you get into that situation, please call the broker team. We can help walk you through that, because preparing an amendment on those things is you giving written notice of dissatisfaction, which then allows the seller to terminate. In this market right now, we have many sellers sitting on backup offers. They do not have to disclose to you that they have a backup offer. A backup offer could be better than yours, could be the same, could be worse, but maybe the backup offer, in some cases, the backup offer is better, or the backup offer might be very close to yours. And if the seller feels the buyer's being unreasonable, or they want to go with this offer that came in 5, 10, 15, whatever thousand higher than yours, and they're just itching for an opportunity to kick your buyer out of the deal, proposing an amendment like that gives that opportunity. So just, I want you to keep in mind that when we're going through this in the material, especially when we're talking about the negotiating part, once you have the accepted offer, that typically is not what we're seeing happening in the market right now. Okay, that is what we see happening more in a balanced market or a buyer's market. In this current seller's market, it's very unusual to be opening up a deal or renegotiating a deal once it's accepted. Unless it's a major safety item, it's an insurability issue, like an oil tank where, you know, the buyer can't get insurance on the house because the oil tank is too old, doesn't meet current standards or code, etc. Then in that case, you're dealing with a little bit of a different situation, because that is an insurability issue that's going to come up for any buyer coming forward. Okay, so it's very situation dependent, but generally speaking, we don't see that second stage of negotiation happening right now. You take the house and you've got it. You don't risk it. Otherwise, you can. And we've had, and I can tell you from the broker perspective, we've had agents with buyers who have gotten kicked out on deals by doing that, proposing an amendment at that stage during this market. Okay, so I just want you to be aware that that's sort of the current situation that we're in. All right. So let's get going. Okay, so this is your 10 contacts you're adding your 10 contacts to your database, speaking with 10 people, writing 10 notes, previewing 10 homes. So right now, obviously, the previewing homes is a little bit more challenging. Normally, we would recommend you visiting public open houses or agent open houses. With COVID, we're not doing that. But we also have a lot more opportunity for virtual tours. So if you're going to focus on an area, it's always a good idea to make sure you're familiar with the inventory there. So if you're looking at having a listing or a sale in an area, doing your own market or CMA on the property in that area helps you to get more familiar with the market and the values there. So that's another way you can sort of COVID preview homes, right? You've got a lot of virtual tour options and Matterport and all of that available to you now. So you can preview it online rather than in person, because we want everybody to stay safe, right? And just one thing about the notes, guys, don't underestimate the power of a written note. This is one of the things that a lot of people forget about now, where technology has made it so much easier to communicate with people in like a text, in a direct message, social media, all of that. There's not many people actually taking the time to handwrite a note. So if you're one of those people that actually does that for someone, it does stand out a lot more. It makes a difference. So just be aware that that is something that can really make an impact on someone by doing that. And because we don't get a whole lot of real mail, especially handwritten notes right now. So let me just, I'm just going to move my pictures here. Can you guys see my screen okay? Okay, perfect. Okay, so your ability to negotiate will directly influence your rate of contracts that close. So what you may not realize it, but you're negotiating in a lot of different aspects of your life. So, when there's something you want, whether it's a car, whether it's just a point of view you're trying to get across with a friend, with a child, with a spouse, you're negotiating in many aspects of your life without necessarily even realizing it. So the idea is that you want to make it a give and take, right? The negotiation is usually a give and take where you both have different viewpoints and you're trying to get to that common ground somewhere between the two of you. So you can be negotiating with your client, you can be negotiating with the other agent, and then the other agent can be negotiating with their client. So there's different phases that the negotiation will take place. Okay. There's some really great scripts in this session, guys. So you should have that in the back of your material. But there are some fantastic scripts here that just make sure you're aware of them. Like the handling your buyer's request for inclusion of seller's personal items. That's a common one that comes up when you're representing a buyer. Clarifying the inspection report when your buyer wants the seller to make non-essential repairs. Again, that one's very relevant in this market, right? Recommend that your seller counters a low offer. Preparing your seller to negotiate high cost repairs. And counsel your seller when the buyer requests personal items. So those are all in this in your material, and there's some great scripts there. So make sure that you are aware of that. So we talked about bargaining being a give and take process, and there is a video here. We're just gonna take a quick peek here. Just one sec. Let me get this rolling.
Hey, Melissa, it's Colin.
Hi. Oh, is that
Hi.
you, Colin?
This one of the things. It's Colin. Yeah. Hi.
Hi.
One of the things that I just wanted to add in here, and some of the people on here know this, but one of the things I would recommend people watch or even read is his name is Chris Voss. He's the author of Never Split the Difference. And
Yes.
It's the Art of Negotiating. We did a master class on him, like a series of him in the program, and a lot of people loved it and applied it to the real estate business. Because like you, and as you would know, you're not only negotiating for the deal, but you're also negotiating with your clients, right? And managing people's expectations, and you're always in negotiation. So then Chris Voss, I feel, is very applicable. So.
Very applicable. Thank you for that. Great suggestion. All right, guys, we're gonna watch. This is just a quick video. I'm hoping the sound will come through, so just let's see here.
Hi, I'm Josh Anderson from Nashville, Tennessee. I've been with Keller Williams since 2006. 2014, we did about 200 transactions for about $60 million in volume. I grew up on a farm, so I've always seen my dad negotiating land and cows and horses. Being the youngest of four, and I'm trading and negotiating with my brothers all growing up. So I've kind of done it all the time. Some people are certainly gravitate toward it and are naturally better at it than others. But I think that negotiation can definitely be learned. I think there's a lot of skills that go into being a great negotiator. I think it's learning your client. Instead of kind of assuming that you know what's important to them, really asking a lot of questions and letting them tell you what they need or want, and then speaking to the other agent and finding out what's most important to their client. And there's some agents that just don't give any. When I have an agent that I'm dealing with that's very tight-lipped, I just keep asking questions, and they give me information that they might not have otherwise given, whether it's a divorce or a death, or it's just they got relocated to some other city. And I think if you're really listening and being intentional and purposeful about listening, you'll find out exactly what's important to them or what they have to have. In certain situations, you have to be creative. We're always looking for that next little tip to help our clients out and win the deals. One of the techniques that we've used a lot that's worked well for us is the escalation clause. For example, if the property is listed at $250,000, we might go in at $250,000 with strong terms, and in special stipulations, we might put in there that we're willing to beat the next best documented offer by $1,000 up to $263,000. And the best offer might be $261,000, so we end up getting it for $262,000. From a client standpoint, be willing to have a real conversation with your clients. It's not us just being realtors for them. It's us consulting and advising and really telling them, if you really want this property, here's what you have to do to get it. Everybody's got a different way of how they negotiate. And networking with other Keller Williams agents around the country, the more you hear it, the more ideas you get. And then you end up gearing it towards you and what you think is going to work best for you and your clients. A lot of it comes down to experience, and I think the more deals you do, the more comfortable you get with it. If you can step back from every transaction and learn something, you're going to get really good over time.
So, question.
Yes.
So with that video, you can't do that though here, can you? You can't say,
You
oh, I'm going to beat
can't.
it by
No,
a
you're Dennis, you're beating me to it.
In his latest Substack piece, Richard Hanania questions why in a democracy divided pretty equally between two parties, most.
There we go. No, you cannot do that here. So the escalation clause part is absolutely not something that we can do here. The states has very different regulations than us, and even state by state, it's different. So that's not something that you can do here at all. And you'll find typically, if you are approached by a buyer that wants to do that, they're typically from the States. Most other provinces in Canada don't allow that as well. It's just not something that we do. Other than that one thing, we can't do that. Any sort of ahas from the video?
Just realizing that you're not just negotiating the deal, you're also negotiating on talking to your actual clients to let them know how everything works and what the best terms are going to be for them if they really desire the property.
Exactly. Yep. That's it. So the importance is asking questions, right? You want to make sure that you're getting to what's important to your clients, so then you can best negotiate for them the terms that they want. And then, right, that next stage is that you're often negotiating with the other agent, and then the other agent is then negotiating with their client. So let me just bring the slides back here.
What about, we can't obviously do that one, but I know as you're in the business and in industry, you learn tips and tricks, right? You learn different things that you can do, and that oh darn, if I wish I had known that. Is there any specifically that you'd point out? I know they're all situational, or is there a class or a course that we can go on with a bunch of you that have been around for a while, that have great experience as brokers, to have that kind of call? What are like?
Yeah, so we have a course that we have done, the brokers have put on. It's called Bulletproofing the Transaction, and that covers some of that. And part of that course is making sure that you're prepared for any of those like little things that can come up, and how to protect the client and yourself to keep the transaction together. So that would be the one I would recommend. Would be
That's
the
amazing
transaction
That's
one.
good.
Yeah.
Colin's got one too, I think.
Yes.
And actually, I think I taught part of it for your market center, Melissa. I would always recommend learning the personality types that exist, and learning your personality so that you can adjust, right? And the skill of negotiating is obviously it's influence. However, it's also being able to come out where everyone wins, or at least they feel like they win.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah.
Keller Williams culture, it's win-win or no deal.
Yeah.
And if you ask agents from other companies that we work with, I would always put money on that when they walk away, they feel good about the transaction as well. I would say most of the time, because we do spend a lot of time learning personality types as realtors. So I would highly recommend learning the DISC and learning who you are, so you can adjust and develop your skills. And
Yeah.
we do have a class.
Yes, we have a class on that too, and Colin can help you with that.
Awesome, thanks.
Yeah, I can help you with that. Yeah, I am not certified in the disc like he is, so but yes, it's a really valuable tool to know that about yourself and your clients. So some tips for negotiating. Obviously, you want to be professional. We just talked about that. Keep your goal in mind. So obviously your goal is to get the signed contract. You want to control what you say to everyone involved in the transaction. So this is important because if you portray an anxiousness or a frustration, and that comes through from you to the client, they feel that. So just be very aware of your emotions. And although I know, like, especially what we'll call the high eyes, you feel for your client, like you take them under your wing. They're like, you know, so when something that is, you know, bad is happening, you take that in personally, and you just be aware that the way you react, and if you react really strongly to something, and that's how you communicate it to the client, you're going to influence how they react. So remember that your role in helping guide them through the negotiations is to be that sort of level balanced person. And you want to make sure that you're not communicating things to the other side that you shouldn't be. And that part of that comes back to the negotiating position that you're protecting for the client. Okay, so just in that, you don't want to, if say, you know, in his video he mentioned a divorce. In some cases, it's not to your client's best interest if you disclose that it's a divorce. So say it's a seller situation, and you know, they say, why are they selling? And you say, oh, it's a divorce. Well, in that case, the buyer and the buyer's agent may interpret that as it's a forced, pressured sale. That works against your client in that case as the seller, not for them. So just be aware of the information that you're giving to the other side, and remember, from the broker standpoint, like, your fiduciary obligation is to your client. So you do have to be careful about sharing confidential information across to the other side without their permission. And in the market we're in now, where we're seeing a lot of the letters coming from buyers to sellers to try to entice the seller to go with their offer, that is okay, you know, because obviously the buyer's writing the letter, they're giving you permission to share the letter, they want the letter shared. That's part of the tactic to help the seller select their offer over potentially, you know, another, or others in most cases. But you just be very aware that you don't want to pass on any sort of information that would be at their disadvantage. Now, if it's a divorce situation, say, and you're on the listing side, if one of the spouses has already moved out and the person goes into the house and sees only, you know, her clothes and his clothes are gone, well, then they're going to put two and two together. But don't actually give that information unless the clients ask you to. And you'll find that that's a common question you're going to get from agents. Why are they selling? Why are they selling? Why are they selling? You don't have to give them the answer. And nor should you if it's going to put your client at a disadvantage. So, you know, they're moving. They're moving, simple, right? And I don't say that to be snarky, but it's just, you have to look out for your client's best interest. Okay, so just keep that in mind. You want to always be referring back to the motivation. So why your client is selling or why your client is buying. So that comes back to doing that really detailed needs analysis and consultation. So if you're on the buyer side, you're doing that thorough buyer consultation with them. On the seller side, same thing. You want to always bring it back to their motivation, right? What is it about X that's going to get them to where they need to be by X, right? And this one is really important. You want to listen more than you talk, right? So just because you're not giving the other side information doesn't mean they're not going to give it back to you. So if you're listening and you're actively listening, you can learn things that actually can help put your client at a disadvantage, because that other agent could be just giving you lots of good things to help with your client's offer. Okay, so keep that in mind. And again, just circling back to this, don't be attached to the outcome. So that's my point about not letting your emotions get too involved. You're not going to always be able to get everything all the time, right? So you want it to be a win-win and work towards that, but you may not be able to get every single thing they want, and that's okay. That happens. And one of the things that is really important, especially if you're dealing with a situation where you're trying to gauge, what the motivation is on the other side, an actual phone conversation is a really good idea. Okay. Again, with the text, you've got so many agents, texting agents, emailing agents. You can't always pick up on the verbal cues that there might be, as there would be in a phone conversation. So if you're able to, it's always a good idea to actually pick up the phone and have a conversation with the other agent. You'll find that you're going to get more, in most cases, you're going to get more information than a simple text or an email. Okay. And that's especially important now, because if you're on the buy side and you're trying to help your buyer win out in the multiple offer situation, that listing agent may reveal the seller's motivation, why they're selling. They may reveal what their closing date preference is, although that background information that helps your buyer have an advantage. Okay. So common points of negotiation, obviously price is the main one. And while price is usually the most important factor, it's not always the most important factor. The terms of your offer. So if you go in with an offer and you're asking for, all the appliances, you're asking for their, grandmother's antique Tiffany light and all this stuff that, wouldn't necessarily normally be included, that's going to potentially put your buyer at a disadvantage. So keep in mind that when you start to ask for extra things, it affects your offer standing against the others. In your material, you'll see that they've got day of completion costs. We call that closing costs. Again, that's something that's not typical here. We don't typically see closing costs being covered off by a seller. So just be aware that that's something that's not, even in a normal market, that's not common. That's not typically done here. So you can just kind of scratch that. Closing date, and I think I mentioned this to you guys in the last session, is very important. And when you're competing against multiple offers, it's, and I think, Mike, this is one of the questions you had asked last week, and how to give your offer an advantage. Asking what that preferred closing date is, checking on the possession on the listing cut to see if they've stated what it is on Paragon. You can see that. If it's not there or it's not clear what it is, ask the listing agent. And I'll tell you that we have had multiple examples where the seller went with an offer that was a lower price because of the closing date. sometimes money doesn't win it.
Hour and a half.
Right? So it all depends on their situation. If the seller doesn't have a place to go, they're waiting for a house to be built, they're amalgamating two households and they're coordinating closing dates on something else. Like there's all kinds of different factors at play there. So always in a competing offer situation, ask what their preferred closing date is. Conveyances, that is your like chattels. So if you fridge, stove, washer, dryer, dishwasher, a lot of people want them included. Just because they're included on the listing cut doesn't mean that they're included and staying. So if you want all those appliances to stay, even though it says in the cut they're included, you need to actually list them again in your agreement, in your chattels clause. Is everybody clear on what I mean? Okay. So that's one of the things that you need to make sure. You're better off to list it again. I know a lot of people will say, well, the dishwasher's attached, it's wired in, it stays. True, it does. List it anyway. In the chattel section, list all of your appliances that you want to stay in your clause, okay, in your agreement. If there's something unusual that they've listed as included, one of the more common ones is a pool table. Often, we've got a lot of seniors or retirees that are downsizing. They've got these great games rooms in their big houses. They don't want the pool table anymore. They've listed the pool table can stay. You need to relist that in your chattels in your agreement to make sure that it's very clear that it is staying. If you don't list it, it doesn't need to stay. And then it doesn't have to be there on closing. So just make sure you list that. We talked about this too, the deposit in a multiple offer. The higher the deposit amount, the stronger your ability to finance the property, your willingness to carry through. It shows your good faith in the purchase. So if your buyers are able to put a larger deposit down, that's always a good thing. And as I mentioned the other day, our deposits here are typically lower than what you're seeing all the buyers coming from out of province. So people coming from Ontario, BC, they're used to deposits quite a bit larger than ours. Like a typical deposit is 1% to 2%. Like it's not these huge massive deposits that they're used to. So if your buyer is able to put a large deposit, encourage that. That's always a good thing. And we talked about conditions as well before. So home inspection, if you're on an unserviced lot, so if they're on well and septic, you've got your water flow test, your water quality test, right? So and then your septic inspection. So you've got all of that. Your well and septic schedule covers off both your water and septic conditions and inspections. And obviously, if you're on well and septic and you're financing, you're going to need to do a water test. The bank will need to see a clean water test for financing. But if your buyer is willing to waive those, and that's, again, some of the things we're seeing happening now is inspections waived. Again, that's a conversation where you need to educate the buyer. So if you're unclear on any of that, just call the broker team and we can help walk you through that, whether it's in their best interest to waive those inspections to get the house. Okay. One thing that will come up from time to time, when we're dealing with more of a balanced market, especially if people are looking to do, some sort of amendment on an inspection item, you can't do a cashback. And this is like an old phrase that you might have heard of, where, a client might say, well, can I just have a cashback on closing? No, The simple answer is no. The banks do not like cashbacks. Okay. Years ago, we used to be able to do cashbacks. That was, way back. We can't do that now. The banks don't allow for a cashback. So any sort of amendment that has any sort of cashback element to it or wording is not going to fly. If they're not financing and they want to do some sort of credit on closing, that could be an option, but only if they're not financing. If there's any sort of financing involved, you cannot do any cashback on closing. Okay, so the simple way to deal with that, if the repair or the item isn't going to be repaired or replaced, and the seller just wants to address it in a monetary or a financial way, is to just reduce the purchase price by the amount. And then you're not dealing with any sort of cashback or credit element. And the price, like, so say if it was something like a $5,000 issue, then the purchase price is reduced by the $5,000 for the issue. So that's typically the only other way to do it is a holdback. So if the seller didn't have time to complete it, you can do an amendment with a holdback that'll be held with the lawyer. And then once the work's completed and the invoice provided to the lawyer, then the funds are released. Again, that's something that the broker team can help you with if you get into that situation. So call us on that. But just my main focus is just wanting you to be aware that a cashback is not something you can do. Okay. Questions? No? All right.
If I can say something, Melissa, it's
Yes,
happened a few times when I'm on the receiving end, but when you're negotiating in that and you're sitting in the room with your clients, make sure that your call is ended before you turn around and start talking to your clients.
Yes. I feel you're speaking from experience there, are you?
No, I was on the listening side.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Yes. Call ended button, very important.
And you didn't hang up, did you, Mike?
Too funny. Okay, so there's the 3 P's approach to negotiation. So it's prepare, present, and position. So the prepare is the first P, and that's the stage where you want to build confidence to make things go smoothly. So you want to know your goal, have a clear goal of reaching the win-win for both the buyer and the seller, and bringing everything back to the motivation of the client, right? Know your client, so make sure you fully understand what their goals are, and learn which areas they're willing to negotiate and what is like a firm stance for them. And most clients will be very upfront with you about that. As you get into a rapport with them and build that relationship, they'll tell you, I'm willing to compromise on this, but this is a deal breaker for me. I'm not willing to compromise on this, right? You want to make sure you're thinking ahead. So anticipate what the other side is going to want out of the negotiation, and then set clear expectations. So prior to meeting with the other party, you want to make sure that you've got clear expectations set with your client. That old under promise over deliver phrase, right? So make sure that expectation is set, and that they understand what your approach is, right? You want to make it a win-win for both sides. If you end up where it's a lopsided win-lose, it typically doesn't feel very good for either side in most cases. Okay. Be informed. So before making an offer or counteroffer, make sure, like we talked about this the other day, we don't see agents talking to agents a whole lot anymore. So it's always a good idea to pick up the phone and talk to the other agent. Obviously, make sure you're following all of the rules and regulations set out in the Real Estate Trading Act. If you have any concerns about something a client's asking you to do, call us brokers and we will guide you, and know your documents. We've got lots of great broker memos on Weebly as well. So if there's something you're not sure of, or another agent said, oh, you should check out such, Anne's memo on what, X, Y, Z, they're all there under our broker memo section in Weebly. So if you want to check out some of our previous ones we've sent out, they're all there. All right, so the next thing, there's a scenario here about negotiating and being clear on the client expectations. So I'll read it to you guys. You are representing a single buyer. Your client is renting her present property. Like any first-time buyer, she's looking to you to guide her through the process. The asking price for the home she really loves is $175,000. The house appears to have evidence of a roof leak. It is listed as is and is correctly priced. Your client would like to keep her payments as low as possible since she still has a number of student loans to pay off. She wants to write an offer for $155,000. There has been quite a bit of activity on the listing. So in that scenario, what do we need more information on?
How long has it been on the market?
Mm-hmm. Yep. What else?
Well, I'd have an inspection done
Yeah,
because the leaking roof might be just one minor problem.
that's right. Exactly.
So that 155 may be justified.
Yeah, exactly. Because there could be a possibility that the 155 is fitting for the condition, right? What about the timelines? In this case, your buyer is in a rental, so you ideally need to know when she needs to be out or has to be out of her rental, and what your sort of closing date these sellers would be looking for to make sure that that's going to line up, right? And there could be some leverage there as far as if your buyer is able to be flexible, maybe she's on a month to month now with her rental, that she could be able to give that seller exactly what they want for a closing date, right? Anything else? No? Okay. We'll move on to the next one. So the next one is to present. So when you move into the negotiation process, by presenting your offer to the co-op agent, you want to listen to the response. Again, you're not necessarily always going to get that other agent on the phone, but if you can, it's very helpful. So you're going to first call them to let them know that the offer is coming. And then you're going to pay attention to their nonverbal cues. So often you can hear the tone in their voice, especially if you start to talk about terms of the offer with them. You can hear that. Obviously, if you see someone, there are the actual facial visual cues, but that's going to be very unusual that you're going to actually physically see a co-op agent anytime soon. You want to let your offer stand. Once you present your offer, don't be hounding the other agent, and because you don't want to appear overly eager either. Okay. Listen carefully to what's important to the other side, and make sure you maintain your calmness. We talked about that. You want to make sure that you don't have a really strong emotional reaction if they come back with a counter or to your offer. Make sure you're focusing on your client's needs, and give your offer the best chance you can. And in this case, when you send your offer over, it often now helps to have the buyer's permission to give a little bit of information about the buyer, to give them that leverage, depending on the seller's situation. Often it's helpful for them to know a little bit about why the buyer is attracted to the house, why they want the house, how they're going to care for the house, all of those kinds of things that you can put in a letter, or, you know, a preemptive explanation with your offer. Okay. And you'll find that's pretty common, especially where we have a lot of military postings back and forth here, that and RCMP and military, a lot of the member to member, they like knowing that another member lived in the house or is buying the house, or is, you know, they're moving into a community that is got a strong, you know, member presence, we'll say. They feel more safe and secure knowing that. So sometimes you'll see that that is something that you wouldn't necessarily know about a buyer, that you're being told because either the member has agreed to let that be disclosed, or in some cases it's a small enough community that the member selling knows the member coming in. So you'll get some of that information crossover, and that can be some extra leverage as well. They like knowing that that's the community or the individual that's coming in to buy their house or selling their house. So the next thing we're going to talk about is preparing to negotiate. So you'll see, like, there are a lot of nonverbal cues, right? So that can be body language, tone of voice, the rate of their speech. And that can give you an idea of whether things are going in the right direction or the wrong direction. So in the case of something face-to-face, like positive gestures would be like the nodding. You'll get that. Sometimes people don't even realize they're doing it. You'll notice they're nodding. That's typically a positive reaction, right? There's some form of agreement there. In person, if they're open, their body language is more open, is a positive. And then the negative, like if their body language is closed off, right? Crossed arms, crossed legs, like eye contact is like not there, then that's a more negative. On the phone, if they're upbeat and empathetic, like, oh, great, I'm so happy to have your offer, that's fantastic, right? Versus oh yeah, all right, great, yeah, I'll present your offer with all the others, right? Like, you can hear the difference, and you'll be surprised that people don't necessarily realize that they're giving these cues when they are, right? Especially, you know, if they're talking really fast versus, you know, a more slow, like, pace of speech, right? Is that there are all those little cues. So just be aware when you are speaking to the other side, that you can pick up on these cues. And you
the
can
head nodding thing, I'd have to that'd be a 50-50 shot, because I head nod a lot and half the time my mind is elsewhere. So it doesn't mean I'm agreeing with anybody. It just, yeah, I'm hearing something. I just don't know what it was.
Yeah. And like, sometimes it's one of those things that people don't even realize they're doing, right? Sometimes the nodding is just them acknowledging that they're listening to you. So, yeah.
When Dr. Strang was trying to sell the AstraZeneca virus vaccine,
yes,
if you watch him on that news broadcast, he wasn't looking up at the camera, he was looking down. And the whole time he was talking, he was shaking his head left and right. He didn't believe a word that was coming out of his own mouth.
Yeah.
No, it's funny because talking about that, getting off topic, I told, like, mom and them, they didn't bother taking it. They waited. They're doing their Pfizer this week. I'll be doing the same thing. But that's my own personal choice. I'm not doing the AZ.
Just for everybody's knowledge, they just announced that they have a drive-through vaccination clinic set up now for anybody over 50 for Pfizer and what's the other one that's so good?
The Moderna.
Moderna. So it starts now. So if you know anybody, get them to call in.
Oh, that's fantastic. I didn't hear that. Wonderful.
My client's a doctor working on it.
Ah, oh, good. Okay, so we did that. Let's keep going here. We talked about the nonverbal cues. So we're going to talk about tactics and counter tactics. So in negotiating, your clients may use certain methods in attempt to manipulate the negotiation. And often some of these tactics can be predictable, so you can learn to accurately identify them, and then you can respond with the counter tactic that is most fitting. So they give us 3 examples of tactics. So the first one is nibbling, they call it. So what it means is once your client has agreed to one major concession, they keep coming back for other small things. Okay, so like the nibbling, they're coming back. So to stop that, ask for a concession in return before agreeing to any further, and that usually stops that. Now, again, it depends on the market we're in. The other one is called hot potato, and that's when the other party tries to pass a problem onto you. This happens quite a bit. So, for example, the co-op sales representative tries to pass all day of completion costs to your client because their client can't afford them. Again, that's something that we don't typically see here. But in a case like that where they're trying to pass a cost off to your client, then you just throw it right back to them and test the validity. So find out if the problem is real and have they exhausted every possible solution. So sometimes with this cost related thing, it can be, something like their financing terms aren't what they want. They got approved for X amount and now they can only get X. Well, you can throw that back to them and say, well, have you talked to my lender? Here's my lender's phone number. Have them talk to them, right? That's the hot potato. The good guy, bad guy is, the good cop, bad cop scenario. So especially this is common if you have 2 people that work together on a team. So it could be a husband and wife, or mother, daughter, mother, son, father, daughter, father, son, whatever. And one appears friendly and considerate, and the other is more difficult and aggressive. And you've got like sort of like the same sort of thing as like often happens with at a car dealer. I think it's probably the most typical example that you think of is like the good guy is the salesperson and the manager up, my manager won't let me do that. That's the bad guy. So in that case, the best thing to do is to just call them on the game, and you can say like, you can call them right out on it and say like, don't good cop, bad cop me. Come on. And if it continues, then attribute what the bad guy says to the good guy, since they're a tag team anyway. And that usually diffuses the situation, because you then have 2 bad guys, and typically the good guy doesn't want to be the bad guy. So yeah, those are 3 common ones. And then next we're going to talk about positioning. Okay, so positioning the idea is to move everybody closer to an agreement. You want to position them to move forward to the agreement. So you want to acknowledge and affirm common ground when the buyer and seller in agreement are at the same position, and then identify what you can easily adjust and what's sort of set in stone that's not going to change. And you want to make sure you're asking questions. So what and how questions to understand the other party's value. And you want to make sure that you're understanding why something's important. So if a buyer wants to close within 60 days, you might say, Mr. Seller, you are requesting a 30-day closing. What's important about closing in 30 days? So if they become defensive, then you say, my goal is to let the buyer know why that's important to you, right? So it's all about knowing what's important to the client. And positioning, this stage can be a bit of a process. So you may have to go, there may be like multiple back and forth to come to an agreement. And, sometimes you might be lucky enough to have it be one counter offer and you're done. But often there might be some other little, things, or more than one back and forth to make it all come together. And you do have to, at this point, know when to walk away. If you're dealing with someone that's really just not willing to work with you, you have to know when you're not going to make a deal happen. And, you want to walk away without, burning that bridge. But at some point, sometimes you just can't bring the two sides together. Sometimes they're just too far apart, no matter how much you try to help and coach and ask questions. So, if a seller's really reasonable in their expectations, that can be a reasoning why it might not work. I'm just looking at my notes here. And in how you walk away from the situation, if you make it a positive, if the seller does have second thoughts, or the buyer, they're going to be more likely to approach again and come back to you. Whereas if you make it a really negative exit, then even if they do reconsider, they're probably not going to reach back out to work with you to get it together. So just make sure, again, you're trying to make it as positive an experience as you can. So the next thing is an exercise where we practice positioning. So the idea is that we have a buyer's rep and a listing rep, and we're going to go through, we'll just do this together. We'll go through the scenario, and then using what we've learned, you're going to prepare for the negotiation and then present your case to your partner and practice positioning. So the idea is that we're going to go back and forth 2 times and both be aiming to come to a win-win agreement. Okay, so the scenario is the property has 4 bedrooms, 3.5 baths, and is listed at $350,000 in a well-established neighborhood. The house requires new carpeting throughout the first floor and a new garage door opener. 3 offers have been made, but all were below the asking price. So the buyer rep role is your buyers are making an offer of $340,000 for the house. They have been pre-approved. The buyers would like to close in the shortest time possible since they are moving from out of state and need a home for their family. Since they are leaving their appliances in their current home, the buyers would also like all of the appliances to be included. So on the listing sales rep side, your sellers have raised their family in the house you are selling and have many friends and family in the area. Since their children are now grown, they no longer need the amount of space their current home provides and have purchased a home in Florida. They would like to give all the appliances to their daughter, who has just gone through a divorce. They will not be moving until they have sold their current house, and although they would like to get to Florida as soon as possible, they are ready to stand their ground regarding the price. So in this scenario, what do you think we would go back at? So the the buyer's agent is offering $340 and they want the appliances. The sellers are pretty firm on their price of $350 and don't really want to leave the appliances because they want to give the appliances to their daughter. Okay, so in this situation, if we're off, what is the guidance you're going to give the seller as the seller's rep? So you've got an offer in hand of $340 on a list price of $350. And all the other offers they had were below the asking price. And they want the appliances and the sellers don't want to leave the appliances. What approach would you take with the seller in this case?
350 appliances in.
Yeah. So you'd counter back 350 appliances in.
I'd want to know how old the appliances are,
Yeah.
how long your daughter can afford to wait for them.
Yeah.
And if they're used appliances, they can probably replace them fairly cheaply with the proceeds of the sale. And she can get them right away. And you can accept this or just counter a little bit higher.
Exactly. And that's a good point, Mike. A lot of sellers get hung up on their appliances, and oftentimes they're older appliances, right? You know, if 5-10 years old, they're not worth they're not worth what they were when they bought them. And you've got a lot of opportunity now. Well, during COVID, all appliances seem to be delayed, but there's a lot more opportunity with resale for appliances for people. And so just because you can't necessarily afford a brand new set of appliances, you've got, scratch and dent sales, you've got buy and sell, you've got Kijiji now, you've got all kinds of different options to get still a decent set of appliances for a competitive price, right?
What most people don't know, Melissa, is that when our parents were buying appliances when we were kids, they were getting 20 and 30 years out of those appliances. Now you're lucky if a fridge lasts 10 years because you're putting small condensers in them to be energy efficient and they're burning out. And the front load washers, they're going before 10 years most times.
Yes, it's true. Yeah. So that's a conversation, right, about setting expectations with your seller and, what is the true value of those appliances, and what again, digging deeper into the situation with the daughter, right, like Mike said. So from the buyer's from the buyer agent perspective, if you're presented with a counteroffer of $350 with appliances in, how are you going to coach your buyer in that counteroffer?
I was a seller, so someone else has to do this. I was giving the advice to the seller last time.
Come on, guys. There's no wrong answer.
Yeah, let the newer agents go first.
Well, I mean, if it's for the buyer this time, and they really want the appliances, then you can do a couple different things. You can tell them 350, the same thing I would tell the seller, but 350 appliances in. See if, right, offer them the full price, but appliances in. The other thing too is you can always go get the mortgage where you can grab a few extra bucks and just buy brand new appliances. Again, like Mike was saying, depending on how old the appliances are, right?
Exactly. Yes, that's right. So good point. So if they have the ability to do a purchase plus improvements on the mortgage, so if we're talking about like a minor renovation, that's an option. Also, right, building that appliance cost into their mortgage is an option, right, in that way. So having that conversation with them as well. And from the listing side as well, if they've already had 3 offers all lower than list price, it's also setting that realistic expectation, right? Now this is basing basing this on being in a balanced market, okay, not in our current market. But if you've already got 3 offers under list, the market is speaking to us, is a conversation that I would have as a listing agent, right? The market is speaking to us. The market is dictating what our value is. And if we've already had 3 offers below list, now we've got a 4th offer below list, we're very close together. If the market is indicating that, you know, our price is a bit high, typically on a $350,000 house, if we're going to be looking at making a price reduction, you're going to be looking at a $10,000 price reduction, which is going to put them at 340. Right? So are you going to wait it out to see if someone else comes along? Now we're on offer number 4, or are we going to listen to what the market is speaking to us about our pricing, and realize that the 340 is really not a bad offer, considering we've already had 3 others we didn't take that were lower. And if we were going to adjust our price to reflect what the market is saying to us, then we would be going to 340 anyway. Right? So it's all about having the conversations and setting the expectations with the client. Obviously, in this situation, we're looking likely more in a balanced or a buyer's market here. But if the situation was flipped, we'd be having a completely different conversation, right? So,
You're so good.
knowing your market conditions and what's happening in your market is important to be able to have those conversations, right?
I think one of the most important things you're saying there is that you're talking in the third person. So you're taking the heat off of you and your opinion, and it's the market doing the talking that they should be listening to. Exactly. And also, you know, as agents, we have to remember that we don't just negotiate with the other side. We have to negotiate with our buyers and our sellers too. And we always have to be thinking win-win negotiating and not win-lose. Exactly. So you got to get them, you know, thinking that. I always go back when you were single and in a bar, and you know you're looking for a mate and you find someone that you're attracted to. You know, people say they don't sell and they don't negotiate, but you were selling and negotiating all your life. And in a bar or in a social event, there was no room for win-lose negotiating. You've got to be doing win.
It's true. Yep. You negotiate in all aspects of your life, right? Yep. Okay. Yes.
So in that situation, if you're representing the sellers and somebody came in at like the 240 and said, we want the appliances, we want to close right away, and you had that in front of the client, obviously having the market will dictate the price. That's a great way to start, because the 3 offers at first. What would you recommend to your sellers to go back to as a counter? Does that make sense?
It would depend on how long it was on the market. Like if we had been on, and how many showings we had. So if we were in like in a balanced market or a buyer's market, if we had more than 10 showings and we were on the market for more than 30 days and we already had 3 low offers, then I would really be continuing on the conversation that I had just mentioned to you guys, because at that point, you're now looking at a price reduction, because obviously, you know, the writing is on the wall. There needs to be some sort of price adjustment, and to do a price adjustment of only $5,000 is really not effective, especially like in that price range. You'd want to get it down under that 350 mark. So like I would do a price reduction of 10. That would be what I would recommend. So that 340 doesn't look so bad. So that would be the way I would approach it with them if that was the case. If it was you know, a shorter time frame, you know, obviously they've had at least 3 other showings because they've had 3 other offers that they didn't take. So in that case, I feel that that's really an indication of what the market is really speaking to them on that. You might go back at 345, somewhere in the middle, which is still, you could preface that if the buyer was willing to do that, in that it's still a win for them, because your next option would be to drop your price to 340. So
Right.
if you frame it to them in that way, you're still winning. You're still coming out $5,000 ahead of where you would have been. Yeah, then I would go that way. But it would depend on those other factors, how I would sort of steer them.
That makes sense. And what about something as small as the appliances?
It's so funny how I find how people get hung up on the appliances. Typically, what I find with that is you have to remind them that, you know, once they're a few years old, they really don't have a whole lot of value. And is it really worthwhile moving, you know, these 5-10-year-old appliances?
Right.
Who's to say they're going to even survive a move?
That's right. And you know,
Right.
exactly. And what Mike said about things not lasting like they used to, not being the quality. So that makes sense. Now, what about the closing date where the family is moving? Obviously, they can do other things in the meantime. If the closing date, that's when I would pick up the phone and have that conversation with the agent, right? And then together you'd figure what would work best.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And sorry if I can interject again, if they are moving like across country, movers charged by weight. And do you really want to move old appliances across the country and pay that price when you could just sell them or let them go and use the money toward a new set when you get to your new home?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great point too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just sold all my weights when we moved back home here from out west, and paid $1. It was like a Father's Day thing, so it was $1 a pound. But to move it, $3 a pound. So I'm like, well, that's a no-brainer.
Okay, so the next thing is to negotiate a counter offer. So the idea is we're going to review the scenario and then use what we learned in the previous session to prepare and negotiate a counter offer, which we've kind of already done, and present our case and our position. So the client, your client has found the house they love and it's in the neighborhood they want. It is at the top of their price range and does need some work updating the kitchen and master bathroom. Your client makes an offer on the property and the seller sales representative, I must warn you that we've gotten several offers and your offer is pretty low. So from the listing agent's side, your sellers need to move within 45 days due to a job transfer. You feel you have priced the house competitively. You are aware the house needs updating, but the sellers don't see the need because the house was just fine for them. There have been multiple offers. The other offers are still standing, but the timing may not work for the seller, and the latest offer is lower than the asking price. You have to let the buyer's sales representative know. I must warn you, we have gotten several offers and your offer is pretty low. So in this scenario, the most important thing here is to make sure that all the parties are aware they're competing. Okay, that's the first thing. And so then the next scenario would be, how would you advise your buyer in this situation? Let's do the buyer side first. So this house that they're looking at it's in the neighborhood they want. It's at the top of their price range and needs some updating. And we've been told by the listing agent our offers on the low end compared to others, which technically they're not allowed to tell us, just an FYI. They can't tell you that your offer is low, but that doesn't mean it doesn't happen. And in this case, they have said that. And the sellers need to be out in 45 days for a job transfer. We think the house is priced competitively. It does need some updates, but the sellers don't think that is overly important. So we've got multiple offers, and some of the other offers, the timing may not work. Okay, so the offer we've got in hand that we're talking about right now is lower than the other offers, but the timing works. So from the buyer from the buyer's side, how are we going to advise the buyer?
I think I would personally, I would start off by asking my clients, if they were the buyers, where they're like setting expectations, say, and before he went in, here's where we're going to go. We understand this house is in the area. How high would you be willing to go? Where are you comfortable going if they come back and say no? That's kind of understanding their current situation and where they can be financially.
Yep, that's important. And also making sure that the buyers understand that they are competing.
Right, yeah.
Right? So making sure that they are putting their best offer forward. So let's just say in this case that they do know they're competing and they've still chosen to go in with the lower offer. From the listing agent perspective, how would you guide your sellers in this scenario? So you've got some offers that are better in price, but the closing date doesn't quite work. And you've got this offer that's lower in price, but the closing date does work.
I'd probably counter a higher offer and renegotiate the closing date.
Yep.
I would also ask the person who had the exact closing date if they wanted to go in as a backup offer.
Yeah, exactly. So that would be what I would recommend as well. In this case, the timing and the price are your two most important factors. So it sounds where they need to be moved within 45 days, they're looking for a pretty quick closing. So if one of the other offers that was higher had a longer close, then I'd be having the conversation about countering one of those offers out sooner. And if they weren't able to do that, then obviously we'd look more seriously at countering this lower offer. So in this case, the good thing is for this seller, they've got a few different options, and it comes down to how important that closing date for them is for their job transfer. So for some job transfers, if the company is covering the costs of the move, then, and they're willing to, even in some cases, they'll even put them up in term in a accommodation of some sort if the closing dates don't quite jive. So you'd also want to have that conversation with the seller, because that could be a possibility. If one of the higher offers had to close a little longer, and these sellers need to be gone for work in a relatively short time frame, is their employer willing to put them up for some sort of temporary interim accommodation? Because often the closing date issue is because they either need to be physically there to report for work, first of all, and second of all, it often has to do with the financing to be able to close on the next property. So if there's interim accommodation available, that could be one option. The other option is if they do need to be there and they need some sort of, they don't want to or can't do an interim accommodation, then there's a bridge financing option as well. And again, that might be something that the lender, the employer might be able to give them some help with. Some depends on who they're moving for, right? Different companies will do things. So anything like RCMP or like Brookfield Relocation for Military, they pay for all their moving costs. So, and in many cases, if the timing doesn't line up, they'll even put them up in a hotel for a specific period of time. So knowing that information is also helpful in the seller being able to properly respond to the offer. And then you can then decide whether it's more important for them to take the higher offer and work with the closing date, so counter on the closing date, and then or work with the lower offer and see if you can get them up higher on price. The only thing with the lower offer is if the lower offer knew they were competing, and still came in low, chances are they're very unlikely to want or be able to move up on price. So you're in this scenario, in most cases, you'd be better off to work with the higher offer and make some sort of arrangement on the closing date, because at least then you're getting your price, whereas with the other, you're not. But again, it all depends on the specific situation for the seller. And sometimes people will put a value on something like the stress of moving and having to rush and move and pack and be out sooner in some cases, right? If somebody wants a really quick closing, that's not necessarily going to be a positive for everyone. I think Mike had mentioned that the other day when we chatted about that. And in that case, sometimes a seller will feel that that's too much pressure on them to have to try to make a move happen that quick. In this case, these guys want quick, so to get to their next city that they're moving to. So that would be the conversation you would have with the listing as the listing side. And on the buyer side, depending, you'd really want to dig deep on how much your buyer wanted the house. If they really wanted the house and you knew they were competing, then guiding them to increase their offer, or be willing and open to accept a counter offer at a higher price to make it happen. Right? Yes, Jen.
Okay, question, because I've hear of these things happening. I hear there's offers out there and people buy and list houses. And anyway, so I'm all new to this aspect of it. So for those people that have been through this, that's awesome. So I guess my question, Melissa, would be, I'm hearing, all these ones where they're like, okay, the offer is open until Sunday at 5, and then we'll be reviewing them. So without taking too much time, because I don't want to take from this class, how does that work? So you get everything. Do you review them as you go through? Can you reply to all of them, reply to one? Like, can you just quickly maybe help me understand that process? How
Sure.
that works as you, as the listing agent, and you're getting all these offers, and how that works? Thanks.
So as the listing agent, you set the day and time that offers are in. So say we have a listing and we said offers need to be in today at 4, and they need to be left open until 7 o'clock tonight. So all of the offers have to be in by 4, and then you have between 4 and 7 to present the offers to the sellers. So in the situation where you have multiple offers come in, and as they come in, so if you get one that the price is higher, but the closing date doesn't quite work, then you can go back, reach out to that agent and say, is there any possibility that you could move your closing date earlier or later, whatever the case may be? Mm-hmm. And then if you have that conversation, as early on in the time period as you can with that agent, then you should have an answer back to know which one makes more sense for you to deal with. So depending on how that agent answers and how their buyers answer would depend on whether that was the one you maybe were more favorable to accepting or countering. So in the case with the multiple offers, you can counter within that time frame. The only thing you have to just be aware of is your expiry timeline. Mm-hmm. You don't want to counter one of the offers and then have all your other offers expire, because if the buyers don't accept your counter offer, you want to still have your other offers in play so that right. You can then go to your plan B and accept that one or counter.
So it's all within that time frame.
All within that time frame. Yeah.
But as you're getting them, you're opening, you're taking a look at, are you doing kind of your research as they come in, right?
Exactly.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you would present them all together to the seller.
Right.
And then you guide the seller in what you think would be the top contenders. Often they want your guidance on what you think. You can usually, by process of elimination, you can usually narrow it down to a very small grouping, right? Like there might be 2 or 3, you might, depending on how many you have, it might be 5, right? Depending on the whole total number. Like if you've got 15 or 16 offers, usually you can narrow it down to 3 or 4 pretty quick. So that's sort of where you like whittle it down based on the, price, closing date, terms.
Right.
And then you go through them with the seller and then help them decide what makes the most sense. Sometimes it's very clear cut. And sometimes you'll have one that's way prices better, conditions are better, and you're just like, it's a no-brainer. And in other cases, you have something like this situation where you've got, maybe 2 or 3 that are very close, and they all have different positives for different reasons. And in that case, then it's important to have the conversation with the agent. So if it's a closing date issue, then you can have that conversation with the other agent and know that, so that when you're going through it with the client, you can say, they've asked for X closing date, but I've checked with the agent and they've gone back to the buyer and they're willing to do this, or they can't, all they can do is this. Then that whether that one's workable to make it happen.
Thank you. I love that. Thanks. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Welcome. Dennis, did you have a question?
Yeah. So let's just say you go, okay, all offers to be in by Friday or Saturday night and be reviewed by 3:00 Sunday. So all the offers come in Friday. You start reviewing them. And let's just say there's 15. You still have to get a hold of all 15 agents and say you're in competing, correct? And then once that happens, that gives them the opportunity to submit something else after, or no? Like, how does that work?
So typically with the market we're in now, when you state that all offers have to be in by X date and time, the expectation is that you are competing. So if the first offer in, you need to make sure they know they're competing. I recommend that you let everybody who's offered know they're competing, just as it's a courtesy to make sure, and you're following the rules to a T. And it doesn't have to, in that case, it doesn't have to be a call. It can be a mass email out to everyone who's offered and like BCC them, or you can, through showing time, you can send out a mass message to everyone who's shown the property and say, we are in receipt of, our first offer. Please be aware, any further offers coming in, you are competing. Like, you can send a mass message out to everyone, and then everybody knows they're competing. And some agents are going the extra step further, and they're actually sending a mass message out, like updating everyone on how many offers are coming in. So then, like, they'll say, we have 3 offers in hand, we have 7 offers in hand, we have 10 in hand. You can do that, but you need to you really should have the written permission of your seller to do that. Because you don't have to actually disclose the number of offers, just that they're competing. So if you're going to get into starting to like blast out a broadcast notification to everybody and tell them how many offers you have, I would just get something in writing from your seller that they're okay with you doing that. And with that, sometimes there's a pro and con to that. Sometimes people look at it as that it's drives the competition, and if they see that these offer, you've got so many offers in, they could be more likely to offer. On the flip side, if you've got a whole bunch of offers on a listing and you're broadcasting out, as they come in increasingly, sometimes that can scare people off from offering, because they think like, I'm not going to stand a chance because they've already got 8 offers or 10 offers or whatever the case may be. So just be aware that it could go either way as far as that. And you just want to make sure your seller's okay with you doing that. But yes, you definitely want to make sure you're disclosing that they're competing. And before we were in this crazy market, you wouldn't have a set day and time. So the offers you get the first offer in, As soon as you were in receipt of the second offer, you would go back to the first offer and say, you're competing now. And the second offer would then would already know, because you would have told them before they offered that they were competing. So they would both know. The idea is you have to make it fair and equal to all parties. So everybody needs to be aware that they're competing. So the same thing, if you decide to notify how many offers you have, everybody needs to be, you can't just tell one agent and not the other 5. If you're going to disclose the number of offers, you've got to disclose it to everybody to keep it fair. Does that make sense? Good question. Okay. I think we will.
And you don't know what stress is until you're doing that in a normal market. And you get a tight timeline, eh?
Yes, and that's true. That's the thing in a normal market, the timeline is what's most important. So, and we've had this even happen in this current market, right? So you go, we've had listings, agents in the office have listings, they put them on, they say offers are going to be presented at X day and time, 5 days later, 5 days comes along and no offers. It's happening. It's starting to happen. And so then everybody goes, no offers. All right. So you take that off the listing, and, next thing you know, people are still showing it. It's still a busy market. Next thing you know, boom, offer, right? It's usually the next day or 2 days after your deadline, you end up with the offer in hand. There you go. And so then you have the offer, and then next thing you know, you've got a second offer coming in. Well, that's the same situation as what we would have described in the normal market, right? So what you want to make sure is you're watching that timeline. You can't push someone into competing once the first offer received has expired. So if we received the first offer today and it was open till 6 p.m. tonight, and then the second people say, we're going to offer, and you say, okay, then you need to say, I'm presenting at 5. You need to have the offer to me by 5, because they can't be competing after 6 p.m. Then the other offer's expired. So as soon as you receive the second offer, you let the first offer know you're now competing. They have the ability to revise, right? They can revise, they can leave their offer as is, or they can pull their offer in that case, right? Because the situation has changed. So they can revise. If they revise, they get it to you, and then you present them both together. If they keep it the same thing, present them both together, and there you are. But yes, it's very important to make sure that everybody is aware and informed that they are competing. Yeah.
Melissa, if I can just add to that, sorry. I've seen a couple listings lately where they set it up for the bidding war, but all offers have to be in by noon, and they say, and open till 3 o'clock. They're not giving themselves enough time to counter offer anything.
Yeah, that's happening. That is happening where if it's too tight, there is no chance to counter. So in that case, you're accepting, and you're likely accepting the second one as a backup, and then you're rejecting everything else, because you don't have time to play around with counters when the time.
Do you think that's not really the best? That's not really. Do you believe that's representing the seller the best?
It's better to give yourselves a bit of time. Right. I mean, in this market, a buyer is, in most cases, buyers aren't typically expecting a counter, because they know how competitive it is. So in most cases, the buyers are coming forward with their best offer, and hopefully their agents doing the homework to make the terms as appealing to the seller as possible. But you definitely want to give yourself some time to counter, because sometimes it might not even be a deal breaker item, but just something that makes the seller more comfortable, and having the time to counter and have that counter signed off on before your other offers expire, so that you have that fallback to accept the second one while it's still open for acceptance, is important. Yeah. So yes, I would say it is important to give yourself enough time to do that. You don't want to cut it too short, because then you can put the seller in a little bit of a jam that way.
Okay, what's the average now in current market? I know it all depends. That's silly to ask that question, but what, a 24-hour time frame or?
Most I've seen aren't that long. I have seen some, but usually, like, I would say you're usually seeing like a 5-hour window, I would say, on average. Some are longer, some are like that evening and open until the next morning, like more of a 12-hour. Yeah. All right, so we're like nearing the end here, guys. So the action plan to prepare for your next class. There's all the materials there. So make sure you want to, for the next class, they want you to call specific groups. So the idea is to focus on people who live out of your area and other towns, states, or countries, because they may know of someone moving to or living in your area and can give you referrals. And they may know of someone moving in their area and you can refer them to a great KW representative there and gain a referral. So this is one of the common things in our BOLD course that they recommend, that you make those connections with other agents in other areas. So the idea is that if you have, say, a client here that is moving to Moncton, we'll say, then you can set them up with an agent, a KW agent in the Moncton office. And in doing that, because you've made the connection and made the introduction and sent them to that agent, then that agent's going to pay you a 25% referral. So there is a referral form on Weebly you can fill out. So it's very straightforward. You fill out their information, your information, the agent you're referring to, you sign it, the other agent signs it, and then you have it and submit it to the office. And they'll submit it when they have an accepted agreement, when they've actually have something accepted on their end, they'll submit it to their office. And when that closes, then you'll get your referral fee off of the closing. So that is another avenue for you to gain business. So that's one of the things that we find, and agents who have moved from out of province or who have family in another province, there's a whole sphere of people there that you could tap into to build your referral business. And as you meet and make partnerships with agents in other provinces, you can kind of get that reciprocal thing happening where, like, you're sending people their way and they're sending people your way. So it's another avenue for business, and it's nice. And we do have KW offices throughout most of Canada now, so you're able to keep it KW to KW. The Atlantic provinces are completely covered. So we've got agents in pretty much all of Nova Scotia now, PEI, New Brunswick, and Newfoundland. There is KW in Quebec, Ontario, Manitoba, and BC. We've got a little bit of a hole in the prairies right now, but they're working on that. Right now, we've got Winnipeg, and anyway, it's coming for the rest of the prairie provinces is, I think, where the hole is. But you'll see in our closed Facebook group too, if you have, you're looking for an agent for someone relocating to or from another area of the country. If you don't know of someone, you just put a message in there and everybody will help you out with that. And, or you can send a message to Laura Lee or myself, and we can help put you in touch with the team leader, or the OP in that office can give us some referrals if we don't know of anyone personally. We know agents in most offices throughout the country, so we can always set you up. And Colin is a great resource as well for that. So he's able to give you some great guidance, especially for the New Brunswick offices, if you've got anybody in New Brunswick, because he's the PC coach here and there. He's able to sort of partner people up that way too. So he's a great resource for that too. So keep that in mind for referrals. And that's it for today, unless you guys have any other questions.
I don't have a question, but I do have something to show. So Jen and anybody else that hasn't bought one yet, your electronic little measuring tapes.
Yes.
I've heard.
This one's the Bosch. I know it's not coming through very clear. It's the GLM 30. They're 89.98, so 103.48 with tax. It's this one here. My home inspector is this one he uses. He uses it for 5 years. What he does now that it's 5 years old is he just measures one room with the measuring tape, and then he uses that for the rest of it. So he just compares the two. As long as it's good, he keeps going. So it's still in calibration 5 years later. So I'd seen a bunch there that was like 177, and he goes, nope, just go with that one. It works great. And I want to say that might be the same one as Michelle has. I'm not 100%, but it's $90 plus tax.
It looks like hers.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing.
They work.
I didn't even know one existed until like a couple weeks ago. So that's awesome.
Oh yeah, I went and played with it last night.
So much time.
Oh yeah, I played with it last night. So it's good.
Yes.
Great.
That's a great tip. Those are fantastic. So for your interior measurements, it's night and day. And as far as the time, the only thing with those is it makes it hard for you to do your exterior building dimensions unless you've got a partner that can like hold up something solid, because you need the solid wall for the laser beam, right? So in that case, if you're on your own, or you don't have, often you can get your seller to help, right? And you can use your laser if they hold up like your folder or something, so you can get the exterior dimensions. But it's never a bad idea to have one of the longer tapes as well, so that you can do the exterior dimensions.
The wheel, buy the wheel.
Yeah.
Buy the wheel.
Yeah, and you just roll it in. It's simple.
No, not even that one. The actual wheel that you just roll across the ground.
Oh, you mean the like walking one, the extra fancy one. Oh, I don't even have that one.
They fold up. They're good.
Yes, yeah, it saves you time.
That Bosch measure, my neighbor's a contractor. He put a basement washroom in. He made all his measurements with that. It's accurate to a 1/16 of an inch. He took the measurements with that, cut his studs, and everything fit together perfectly. That's how accurate they are.
Good to hear.
Plus or minus 1.5 millimeters. That's the plus or minus 1.5 mils. It's awesome. And when you're using it, just so you got like, I know some of you guys already know it, but Jen, just for example, you go in there, instead of doing the live feed, you do the actual one that calculates the area, and you hit one wall, hit the other, it adds it for you, you write it down.
Amazing.
It's so much easier.
I need to save time and efficiencies as much as I can, especially now. That's a great share. Thank you.
All right, thank you guys. That's it for today. So you've got a session on Wednesday and then the last one on Friday, and that will conclude Ignite. So it's fantastic. Region, when I say region, I mean Canada as a region is just getting going another Ignite. If you're so inclined to repeat it, their starts Wednesday this week. So if there were any sessions that you missed, ours is recorded, so you can go back and watch ours, or you can feel free to jump on one of theirs and catch that missed session if you missed any with them as well. So that'll be running starting on Wednesday.
Now, Melissa, is the information fairly consistent with this one, or would we find there be any differences?
They're teaching directly from the material, and it's all agents throughout Canada. The only difference I would say is even province to province, there are little differences in regulation and paperwork.
Okay.
So some of that sort of broker side of stuff would be a little bit different for them versus us. Like clauses are written differently in Ontario. So anybody from the Ontario offices, the way their clauses are written, like they do waivers there of conditions, whereas ours are deemed satisfied unless notice to the contrary is given. So basically no news is good news, the way our contract's written. Theirs, you want news. You want the waiver to say you've satisfied conditions. So there's a little bit of a difference in that way. But the material itself is all the same.
Okay, cool. Because I'm just now getting to the point where obviously, because I can't go out with my mentor or go with other agents to do things. I want to make sure that I maximize my time here. And that's like amazing. But I'm looking at another 10 weeks of 10 hours a week to say I could maybe be calling people. So
Yeah.
I just want to, that's a great, and if you do want to take that, I think you have to register. There's
You do.
register for it. So thanks for letting me know. I was going to ask that question and I had forgotten.
It's Ignite 2.0. So
Yeah.
if you
Yes.
want to follow along with it, or you know, even just review that versus this one, there might be a few differences, but it's a 2.0.
Perfect. Thanks, Melissa.
You're welcome. Have a great day, everybody. And
Melissa,
enjoy.
thanks.
And yeah, you're almost done Ignite. So be proud and celebrate. That's fantastic.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Thank
Yeah.
you.